Hi guys, this is Mrs. Tellas. I hope you're all doing well. So we're about to do section 7.5. We did just the factoring part on Monday, and now today we're going to factor and then solve as well quadratic equations. Okay, so we already know how to do the factoring part, and we're going to get some more practice with that today. All right, let's go over to the next page. All right, so just a quick review on how to factor. So what we do is we look at factors of 18 that are going to give us a sum or a difference of 11. So I go over here and write factors of 18, and I want the two factors to add up to 11. And I know it's an add because these are both plus. So I'm thinking 1 times 18, well, that adds up to 19, so that's not it. How about 2 times 9? Hey, that's it, because 2 plus 9 equals 11. So I put my parentheses over here, x and x, 2 and 9. And since they're both positive and there's plus signs all over that quadratic, this is my answer. Okay, so I have a -1 down here. If you want to stop and do this one, it's a great idea just for some practice. We're going to be factoring today. Okay, if I go down here, I'm looking for factors of 24. That when I add them, I get a -10. So factors of 24 that give me a -10. So I'm thinking 1 and 24, that adds up to 25. 2 times 12, that adds up to 14. 3 times 8, that adds up to 11. I'm getting closer. How about 4 times 6? That adds up to 10. Okay, but my sign's off. So as I look at it, it's got a plus minus here. Plus on the C and the negative is in the B. That means that both of these are negative. So if I add -4 and -6, that gives me -10. So when I go to factor it, that would be x minus 4 and x minus 6. So again, I'd like you to pause and try number 4 and number 2 if you haven't already, and then I'll go ahead and do them real quick. All right, so I know I need factors of 20 that give me +9. Everything's plus, so I know these signs in here are going to be plus. And I know it's x and x because it's x squared. So I could go through the list, but it's super apparent to me that it's 4 times 5. Because 4 times 5 equals 20, but 4 plus 5 equals 9. So I'm going to put a 4 in here and a 5 in here. And same thing over here. I know because this is plus minus that it looks like this, x minus and x minus. So I'm looking for factors of 6 that give me -5. So 6 times 1 is 7, and 2 times 3 is 5. That's the one I want. So these are both going to be negative because I want this to be -5 when I add them. Like if I borrow $2 and I borrow $3 more, then I owe you $5. So we're going to put 2 and 3 in here like that. And those are your two answers. So I hope you got those right. If you did, give yourself a pat on the back. Okay, and then this is from section 7.4. Let's see if you remember. So this is already factored. It's already a factored quadratic. So I take each one of the parenthesis sets and I set them equal to 0 to solve them. And that's going to be our key today, having them be equal to 0. Okay, so there's the first one, and there's the second one. So here, this is a two-step equation. If it has a +5, I would subtract 5 on both sides. The 3x drops. And then I would divide by 3. So my first answer is -5/3. And here it's pretty much the same thing, just different numbers. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides, drop the 2x, and divide by 2. So my answer here is 3/2. Or if you want to change it to a decimal, you can. That would be 1.5. The other one's going to be a repeater, which is why I didn't change it. All right, here's the new information. So my first step is that I'm gonna factor, just like I did on that connection to prior learning page. And then it's already set equal to 0, so then I'm going to solve, just like I did on the other connection to prior learning page. There really isn't any new learning here. We already know how to do both of these steps separately. Now we're just going to put them together. So I'm looking for factors of -54 that give me a sum of +3. So remember, I'm not going to mess with the negatives at first. I'm looking for a sum or a difference here. So I'm thinking 1 times 54. Well, if I add those, that's 55. And if I subtract them, it's 53. So that's not it. So how about 2? And if I wasn't sure what it is, I would go through and use my calculator. Divide by 2. See, that'd be 27. If I add those two numbers, that's 29. And if I subtract them, that's 25. That's not it. Let's try 3. And I'm just using my calculator just like you are. So 3 goes in 18 times, I think. If I add them, that's 21. And if I subtract them, that's 15. I need it to be 3. That's not it. If I do 54 divided by 4, that doesn't work. Divided by 5 doesn't work. Let's try 6. 54 divided by 6 is 9. 6 times 9. If I add them, that's 15, and if I subtract them, it's 3. Okay, so 3, this is the number I want. I know it's 9 and 6, I just got to figure out my signs. So I know it's negative 54, so one of these has to be negative, only one. And when I add them, it needs to be a positive 3. So it's going to be the smaller one that's negative, because I want the bigger one to take the sign. So then I can put them up here. X plus 9 and x minus 6 is the factored form of that quadratic. So now I can take both of the parentheses just like I did in section 7.4, set them equal to 0 and solve. So x plus 9 equals 0 will be one of the solutions once we solve it. So the first one is negative 9. And the second one, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So x is 6. So there are my two solutions, negative 9 and 6. And I know it wants me to solve because it says it in the directions. And I also know it wants me to solve because it says equals 0. If you look at the problem set that we did on Monday, none of them said equals at all. They just had the three terms, like right here. They didn't have an equals anything. That's how I knew I just had to factor those by looking and without even looking at that parentheses. Let's try this one down here. It's missing the equals 0, isn't it? After I just said that. All right, so we'll write it in. All right, so we're going to factor and then solve, which means we need factors of positive 72. They're going to give us a sum of 17. So as I look at the signs in the quadratic, I notice that's plus plus. So since it's plus plus, I know it's going to be plus in the middle for both of them, and x in the very front because it's x squared. So I could go through my long list. 1 times 72, 2 times 36, 3 times 24. I could use my calculator and go and go and go, but I know it's 8 times 9. 8 times 9 is 72, and that adds up to 17. So I'm going to put an 8 here and a 9 here, and I got to pull down my equals 0. And all I'm doing is dropping that down. And then I'm going to set each one of these equal to 0. So separately, and there's going to be two answers, just like there was in 7.4. So x plus 8 equals 0, and x plus 9 equals 0. So here I would subtract 8, and here I would subtract 9. So my two answers are negative 8 and negative 9. All right, so this is different only because it's not set equal to 0. And if you read the words up here, the equation must be set equal to 0 to use the 0 property to solve like we have been doing. So what we need to do is we need to move that negative 10 to the other side before we factor. So how do we move a minus 10? Well, we do the opposite, which is add 10 to both sides. So that gives me b squared plus 7b plus 10 equals 0. Now remember, I can't add 7b and 10 because one has a b and one doesn't. They are unlike terms. So now I'm ready to factor because the trinomial is over here on one side and it's equal to 0. So I'm looking for factors of 10 that give me positive 7. So it's definitely not 1 times 10 because when I add those, I get 11. That's not it. Let's try 2. 2 times 5 equals 10, and when I add those, I get 7. That means it's it. So we'll put our b and our b, and we know it's plus plus because there's two pluses here. I also know because I already figured it out over here, these are both positive. And then 2 and 5 are going to go in the parentheses in the second position for both. So I have b plus 2 equals 0, and b plus 5 equals 0. So now I can subtract 2 on both sides, and I could subtract 5 on both sides. And my two solutions are negative 2 and negative 5. I want you to press pause, and I want you to try number 4. There should be two answers. First, you're going to move the 15 over. Then you're going to factor it. And then you're going to solve it. Okay, so first thing we do here is we move this 15 over. It's a positive because there's no sign, so we're going to subtract 15 on both sides. Those go away, which is what we wanted. So now it says x squared plus 2x minus 15 equals 0. So now I'm looking for factors of negative 15, the c, that give me the middle, 2, positive 2. And that b is what I'm looking for. So 1 times 15 gives me a sum of 16, and if I subtract them, I get 14. So that's not it. How about 2? 2 won't go into 15. How about 3? 3 times 5. If I add them, I get 8, but if I subtract them, I get 2. That's it, because it's a 2. Okay, but I notice here that this is a negative 15, which means one of these has to be negative. The smaller one does, because this is a positive 2, so I want the bigger one to be positive. So I'm going to put the negative there with the 3. So negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, and if I add them, I get positive 2. So I can factor it now. So I've got x minus 3 for this one, and x plus 5 for this factor. And then I have to set them both equal to 0 and solve them. And these are nice little one-step equations. So I'm adding 3 to both sides. So that gives me x equals 3. And I'm subtracting 5 on both sides. And that gives me negative 5. So my two solutions are 3 and negative 5. Let's try number 5. Notice that number 5's got a lot of stuff on the right-hand side. First, notice the directions say factor and solve, which means it has to be set equal to 0. So that means that these two terms have to come to this side of the equation, and I need a 0 over here instead. So let's talk about how we can move those. Let's make our t. Let's move the 2b first, just because it's first. It's positive because there's no sign, and we're going to move that how? Hopefully you said by subtracting 2b. So I'm going to minus 2b. So b squared will be first, minus 2b will be second, and plus 13 will be last. And the 16 is still over there on the right. A little bit in our way. We're going to move it. And we need this to be a 0, and currently it's a 16. So we need to subtract 16 on both sides. So b squared minus 2b, those just drop down. These two get combined, and that gives us negative 3 equals 0. Now it's in the form where I can factor it and solve it. So now I'm looking for factors of negative 3 that give me a 2. Well, the only factors of 3 I can think of are 3 times 1. When I add them, I get 4, but when I subtract them, I get 2. Notice that this is negative, so it's not the 4 one, it's this one here, this 2. So one of these has to be negative. And it gives me a positive 2, so that means the smaller one is negative. So I'm going to have b plus 3 as one of the factors, and b minus 1 as the other. And then I'm going to solve them. So b plus 3 equals 0, and b minus 1 equals 0. So I'm subtracting 3, and I'm adding 1. And those are my two solutions for that. I would like you to try number 6. I want you to press pause and give number 6 a try, which means you're going to have to move the 2 over. You're going to have to look for two factors that give you that middle, and then you have to solve. So if you haven't already tried it, I want you to press pause and try it. Okay, the direction said factor and solve, so I'm going to move this 2 over because I know that it has to be set equal to 0, and currently this 2 is in our way. So we're going to subtract 2 because that was a positive 2 since there was no sign. So x squared drops, plus 11x drops, and minus 26 is my sum there, and it equals 0, which is what we wanted. We can't have it that way until we can solve it. We can't factor or solve unless it's set equal to 0. So we're going to do factors of negative 26 that give us positive 11. So 1 times 26, if I add them, that's 27, and if I subtract them, that's 25. Well, that's not it because it's not 11. 2 times 13, if I add them, that's 15, and if I subtract them, that's 11. That's it, right there. This is a negative 26. One of these has to be negative. So since it's a positive 11, I know that the 2 has to be the negative one. Because if I multiply these, I get negative 26, but if I add them, I get 11. So let's go ahead and put our parentheses in there. So this is going to be x and x. And then from this one, I have minus 2. And for this term, or this factor, I have plus 13. And then I set them equal to 0 and solve them. I feel like that's the easiest part for you. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. My first solution is 2. And I'm going to subtract 13 from both sides, and my second solution is negative 13. I think there's only one more example, and it should be number 7, not number 8. So we'll just leave it like that. Press pause and give it a try by yourself. Move the 32 over, the negative 32, and then try to factor it, and then solve it if you can. All right, so we're going to move the minus 32. The opposite of minus or negative 32 is positive 32. Remember, you cannot add 12x and 32 because 12 has an x and 32 doesn't. So you're just going to list them in standard form. X squared plus 12x plus 32 equals 0. That's the form that we wanted in. So now we're looking for factors of 32 that give us 12. All right, everything's plus. Do you notice that? Because both of these signs are plus, there's no minusing here. We know it's x plus something and x plus something. We just got to figure out what. So 1 times 32 is 33. 2 times 16 is 18. This is supposed to be a 12. 3 won't go in. 4 times 8 is 12. There it is. We found it. So we're going to put x plus 4 and x plus 8. And then we're going to solve them both. So x plus 4 equals 0, and x plus 8 equals 0. So if we subtract 4 here, and we subtract 8 here, our two solutions are negative 4 and negative 8. Okay, that's all I have for you. I hope you understand. If you don't, you know I'm on Canvas from 11 to 12 every day. Feel free to join me. I really would love to hear from you, especially if I haven't heard from you yet or I don't hear from you very often, just to make sure you're okay. And you can ask questions. I'll do some of the examples for you. You're on page 389 again, just like you were on there on Monday. And this is Wednesday's assignment. So there's just some solving problems. There's not very many. There's actually a lot less than there was on Monday. So good luck. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Bye.